In the video, The Musical Origin of the 7-Day Week, we saw that the sequence 415-2637 selects the notes in the major scale from the circle of fifths and orders the days of the week. We saw that one piece of evidence for this connection between the week and music is given by Origen, who wrote that the weekday order comes from musical reasons, quoted by the Persian theology. Cassius Dio, a Roman contemporary of Origen, confirmed that the week is related to music, for in discussing the custom of referring the days to the 7 stars called planets, he wrote, "You will find all the days to be in a kind of musical connection with the arrangement of the heavens." In this video, we'll see that the sequence 415-2637 may account for other cultural traditions that we've inherited from the ancient world. Evidence for this comes once again from Origen. Remember that in the video, The Musical Origin of the 7-Day Week, we looked at Origen's description of the Mithraic ladder ritual, a ritual that used a ladder of 7 rungs that represented the 7 classical planets arranged by the sequence 415-2637. But in fact, we only looked at part of his description. Origen went on to write that each rung of the ladder was made of a different metal. The first gate consists of lead, the second of tin, the third of copper, the fourth of iron, the fifth of a mixture of metals, the sixth of silver, and the 7th of gold. What we see here is the traditional value order of the metals. Gold, the most precious metal, is at the top of the ladder, with silver and possibly bronze directly below. Lead, the least valued metal, is at the bottom of the ladder. In other words, the sequence 415-2637 arranges the metals known in the ancient world into their traditional value hierarchy. Over 600 years before Origen, the Greek historian Herodotus mentioned a similar arrangement of 7 when describing the ancient Persian city of Ecbatana. The walls of Ecbatana are of great size and strength, rising in circles one within the other. The number of the circles is 7. The circuit of the outer wall is white, of the next black, of the third scarlet, of the fourth blue, the 5th orange, all these colors with paint. The last 2 have their battlements coated respectively with silver and gold. Herodotus is describing the ancient Persian city of Ecbatana, and remember, Origen also connected the weekday order with Persia, writing that it has to do with musical reasons, quoted by the Persian theology. And remember, too, that ancient Persia shared a musical culture with Mesopotamia, where the sequence 415-2637 formed the basis of the musical system. Let's summarize. The week, the traditional value system of the metals, the Mithraic ladder with rungs that represent the 7 classical planets, and the major scale are all related to the musical sequence 415-2637, a sequence known to the Mesopotamians as early as 1800 BC. Does this sequence have a deeper origin? In fact, it does. Have you ever heard of the music of the spheres? It's an ancient tradition that proposes that musical ratios underlie the architecture of the cosmos, that all things, even the planets in their spheres, are governed by the mathematical laws of music. In the words of Pythagoras, there is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacings of the spheres. Aristotle, writing in the 4th century BC, attributed this idea to Pythagoras and his followers. The Pythagoreans saw that the modifications and the ratios of the musical scales were expressible in numbers. Since then, all other things seemed in their whole nature to be modeled on numbers, and they supposed the elements of numbers to be the elements of all things, and the whole heaven to be a musical scale and a number. And all the properties of numbers and scales which they could show to agree with the attributes and parts and the whole arrangement of the heavens, they collected and fitted into their scheme so as to make their whole theory coherent. But did Pythagoras invent this tradition, or did he learn it elsewhere? In fact, many scholars believe that Pythagoras received much of his knowledge from Mesopotamia. For example, Iamblichus, from the 3rd century AD, wrote that when Pythagoras was in Egypt, he was taken captive and brought to Babylon. Here, the Magi instructed him in their venerable knowledge, and he arrived at the summit of arithmetic, music, and other disciplines. So back to Babylon we go, specifically to tablet CBS 1766, which was made in Babylon a few centuries before Pythagoras. The star drawn on CBS 1766 is not an arbitrary design. It can be derived from two simple musical ratios, the octave, 1/2, and the fifth, 2/3. The star is derived when these two ratios are used to create a 12-note chromatic scale from the circle of fifths, which archaeologists agree was known to the Mesopotamians. Most importantly, when creating this 12-note scale, the sequence 4152637 is generated. To learn more, watch the videos The Origin of the Circle of Fifths and The Origin of the Sequence 4152637, available at musiccircle.net and on the Music Circle YouTube channel. Interestingly, the ancient Chinese used this same 12-note scale as early as the 5th century BC, as proven by this set of bronze bells, which play a few octaves of the scale. And an ancient Chinese text from 2 centuries later describes that this 12-note scale was generated mathematically, using the ratios 1/2 and 2/3, a procedure called the Sinfen Sunyi method. Most importantly, the sequence 4152637 is embedded within the Sinfen Sunyi method, and a 7-pointed star, like the one drawn on CBS 1766, can be derived from its mathematics. The first evidence of the use of the Sinfen Sunyi method in China dates to the 3rd century BC, while Mesopotamian knowledge of the sequence 4152637 is over 1,000 years earlier. So the question arises, did the Mesopotamian musical system find its way to China? Evidence suggests yes. In the early 1990s, the world became aware of the Tarim mummies, naturally mummified bodies found in Xinjiang, Uyghur Autonomous Region in the far west of China. These bodies, some of which are almost 4,000 years old, are remarkably preserved and are of Caucasoid appearance. To date, 23 harps, what the Chinese call konghao, have been discovered in the graves of the mummies, and these harps strongly resemble the angular harp invented in Mesopotamia around 2000 BC. According to the Shanghai Conservatory of Music, cultural relics from the graves show clearly that cultural communication had already begun between Xinjiang and Assyria, a region of Mesopotamia. This suggests that the prevalent view of Chinese konghao's origin, in other words, the traditional view that the konghao, or harp, was invented in China, is questionable. There is also evidence that the ancient Chinese selected 7 notes from the 12-note scale generated by the Sinfen Sunyi method to create a scale identical to the one used in Mesopotamia. And an ancient Chinese text from the 5th century BC suggests that this 7-note scale was given cosmic importance, stating that only after the numbers are made to accord and the musical notes are harmonized will things be unified. Therefore, the number 7 is used to unify their number, and the standard pitches are used to harmonize the notes, and thus it is that there are 7 pitches. The ancient Chinese also gave the 12 notes generated by the Sinfen Sunyi method cosmic significance. For as early as the 8th century BC, each pitch and pitch tube, the bamboo length that sounded the pitch, was associated with one month of the year. In fact, the 12 pitch pipes were considered magical instruments, and there are early references that describe the shaman musician, or Wu, piping off his own qi through bamboo tubes in an attempt to alter the process of nature, of heaven's qi, by sympathetic magic. Interestingly, the ancient Chinese shaman, or Wu, underwent an initiation ritual similar to the Mithraic ladder ritual. The ceremony consisted in mounting the to tui, or sword ladder, a ladder usually made of 12 swords. A ladder of 12 swords suggests a musical association, for not only are there 12 pitches generated by the Sinfan Sunyi method, the term lu, which is generally translated as pitch pipe, originally meant regular steps. Let's return to the Mithraic ladder. There is evidence that a similar 7-runged ladder was known in alchemy. For example, a medieval manuscript contains a drawing that represents alchemical initiation by a 7-runged ladder up which climb blindfolded men. On the 7th rung stands a man with the blindfold removed from his eyes, facing a closed door. Also, an illustration from 1633 shows the 7 steps necessary for alchemical transformation, and, according to Thomas Norton, a 15th century alchemist, this transformation process was connected to music. For to achieve success, you must, by subtle numbers proportionally, join your elements musically. The nature of the connection between alchemy and music becomes apparent when we understand that when the sequence 4152637 is derived from the mathematics of music, it repeats indefinitely. And because it repeats, the number 7 is followed by the number 4. 7 is the sphere number of Saturn, which is associated with lead, while 4 is the sphere number of the Sun, which is associated with gold. Therefore, moving from one cycle of the sequence 4152637 to the next symbolizes the transition from lead to gold. Recent scholarship suggests that alchemy had its roots in the Near East, and that Mesopotamian alchemy is potentially a vital source of information on the earliest technical procedures from which medieval alchemy arose. Interestingly, alchemy was not only concerned with the transmutation of base metals into noble metals, but with the transformation of the soul. And remember, according to Origen, this too was the role of the Mithraic ladder. The cult of Mithra gives a representation of the heavenly spheres and the journey of the soul through these. The connection of the soul's journey with sequential order is also found in the Christian tradition. Church Father Gregory of Nyssa described the week as having the spiritual function of providing a means for the soul to ascend toward God. Nyssa saw the entire history of the human race as a progression toward the divine, a process he called akoluthia, a Greek term that translates as sequence. Gregory may have known that the week is ordered using a musical sequence, for he wrote, "We accept the law concerning the octave which cleanses and circumcises, because once time, represented by the number 7, comes to a close, the octave succeeds it. This day is called the 8th because it follows the 7th and is no longer subject to numerical succession." The sequence 4152637 has been known to the human race for at least 4,000 years. It originates in the mathematics of music, but was used in the ancient world to create what we saw Aristotle refer to as a coherent theory based on the properties of numbers and scales. This theory applied the sequence 4152637 to music, the creation of the major scale, to time, the 7-day week, to measurement, the spacings of the spheres, and to value, the hierarchical value system of the metals. Over time, the sequence 4152637 came to symbolize the ascent of the soul in widely different traditions, in ancient Persian theology, in Mithraism, in Christianity, and even in alchemical initiation. There is something for each of us to appreciate in this ancient cultural tradition, for not only is it drawn from the mathematics of music, it is central to diverse religious traditions, but above all it speaks to us in an ancient and universal language, the language of music. To learn more about the role of the sequence 4152637 in music and cosmology, visit musiccircle.net and the Music Circle YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.